Hello once again, Stephen J. Murphy with you and All About You. Thanks for being with us again tonight. Your favourite show where we talk about your past, your present and your future. So grab your biggest pack of Monte Carlo biscuits and that big Coolabah cask of wine. We all might be needing it by the end of the show. Viv, how are you,
Talk
mother?
for yourself there, Steve. I prefer a very expensive bottle of Moe, but especially after Mother's Day.
Oh, sweetheart, if only we could. Yes,
if only we could.
The budget's getting there. Last week we had a good 50 seconds lead up. You might have heard us talking in the background, anything from the high rents to how on earth are we going to get through the show tonight? And we were leading up to the show, and here you are, you're feeling quite calm.
I'm back and I'm wonderful, and that cask of wine is definitely probably what helps us get there.
It's kicking in, is it? You look lovely, my dear.
Thank you so much. Cobalt blue.
Cobalt blue?
Yes, and you had said that if I'd called you earlier this evening, you would have put a cobalt blue shirt on.
I was going to wear a tie, and then I thought, no, it just looks casual here tonight.
My
We don't want to
TV
be too
husband and
slack,
I
do we?
really should, we really should coordinate more often, shouldn't we?
Viv, who's on the show tonight?
Tonight we have the beautiful Tanya Nadil.
Tulsi Graaff, good to have you with us here this evening.
Great to be here.
And lovely as well. We said just before the show, we swapped chairs with Tulsi because you're on a different chair now.
I'm on a small chair, so I'm not hovering above everybody.
Because I was sort of perched up here, and then we swapped chairs, but you look like you're quite comfortable.
I'm very comfortable, and your height now, so that's good.
Thank you, Mother. Well, great to have you with us. Just for our new friends who are joining us on the show, your background.
My background, well, I've got a law and psychology background, and for the last 7 years I've been working with my business, which is called Lead Your Own Change, and so I do a lot of work with organisations and individuals. A lot is around conflict resolution, communication skills, dealing with change. So I do, mediations, coaching, and workshops.
So a lot of people who are finding themselves even out of work, not too sure where they're going, they're at crossroads, and this is where it affects the confidence. Is this where you step in?
Yeah, look, it's part of what I do. I definitely do a lot of work with confidence, and I love doing that because I think that there are some, relatively small things that we can do that can make a big difference to feeling better about sort of our life and how we manage things.
Yes, and once the confidence goes, everything else starts to erode, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because a lot of people that I speak to, they almost see confidence as like a magic button that, I need to, like you press it and I have confidence, or I need confidence to be able to do things.
Yes.
But in fact, from my perspective, it's more about I need courage to take the action that will give me the confidence.
Is that the number one solution?
Well, I think what it is it's really important to recognise that when we're doing something new or something that overwhelms us, we are unlikely to feel confident.
Yes.
And so it's the small steps that we take in action that will give us the confidence.
You just made me think there for a minute too, because you're quite physical, so you love exercise.
Where did you get that from?
Well, I got the impression that you were doing a lot of walking.
Did you?
Yeah.
At my best, that is true.
No. You are a basketball player.
Oh, well, yes.
Excuse me.
I was trying to be a basketball
and a very
player.
good one at that.
I don't know where you're getting all these
Our conversations together, Tulsi.
Okay, so I'm 46 now. I decided that I wanted to, once in my life, play a team sport. So
at the age of 46?
Yes, that's right. So, actually I was 45 at the time. So I joined a women's basketball team and learnt it last year. I got one season in and then I broke my finger. So I'm having to reevaluate it. But I mean, it's interesting that you bring that example up because for me, one of the I was actually experiencing my own barriers around getting fit. And so a lot of the work I do with people as well is you kind of take a step back and think, okay, you've got some goals, say you want to get fit, and it's not happening. What is stopping you from doing it? Maybe there's another way you can do it. So for me, I thought, okay, so what's something that I could feel passionate about that might make the difference? So I joined the basketball team and I actually wanted to go walking and running and doing all sorts of crazy stuff.
You know how you give people confidence and you lead the change. Did you go through a crisis and realise I'm stuck in a vortex, I need to change myself?
Oh gosh, that's a big question. I mean, it's interesting because
Or did you reach crossroads when you said, that's not working for me anymore, I've got to move on? Because it happens to everybody, doesn't it?
yeah, look, I mean, I don't know that there was a particular sort of crisis point, but I think, you know, for all of us, life is a work in progress. So
Yeah.
at different times we experience challenge and things
Yes.
are hard, and then we
Yes.
have to take a step back and think, okay,
Yes.
what's happening here and what can I do differently that might make a difference? And for me, it's often small steps that can make a big difference.
Yes, and we had Margot Cairns on, hello Margot, a couple of weeks ago, who was talking about tumultuous change, which is
Yes.
going to affect nearly every industry. And we're seeing single-handedly where the internet is just wiping out these industries, and she's saying, get ready.
Yeah, she's
but
just
we're
saying
not
the
too
whole-
sure how we're going to get ready, are we, really? We're just accepting bit
her
by
way
bit.
of saying to get ready is to learn how to adapt to
Yes.
change. So, you know, a lot of people are, you know, becoming redundant, are having to spread out their job skills. They're going, you know, they're finding that, you know, maybe they studied IT at university and by the time they graduate, that form of, you know, technology is redundant. There's a whole lot of things changing, whereas like when I grew up, you could basically study one thing and you could get in that job, and a lot of people stayed in that job forever. Things, you know, that whole, you know, paradigm has completely changed. And I think the thing that you say about courage really measured up with what Margot was saying. Courage is the most important thing. Take that step, you know, because you don't know if you're going to have the confidence until you actually get in there, get your hands dirty and have a go.
Now, how many of us on this table would be prepared to grasp, and even our friends at home, I thought about this yesterday, would you be prepared to study another language?
I've been thinking about doing that.
Yeah, me too.
Because apparently it changes the brain synapses, and it's a very important way of deterring any sort of, you know, mental decline as you age.
Yes.
And because my mother suffered from dementia, it's very important to me to do everything that I can. And learning a new language is apparently one of the number one ways to avoid developing dementia in our elder years.
Well, I mean, I think all those kind of suggestions, even learning a language or taking some different steps that give you confidence is a great way forward. I think one example that stands out for me is a lot of people have a fear of public speaking. So sometimes it can be really helpful to think about some small steps that you can take to get a little more confident. But you have to be really careful when you are trying to get to develop confidence, not to overwhelm yourself. An example I have is, you know, one of my clients, before she came to me, she had this terrible fear of public speaking. So she joined a really full-on public speaking workshop, and it
Tony
created
Robbins style public, like she had to walk across fire before she did a presentation.
Well, it created so much fear in her that it did the exact opposite. So we need to remember that we have to be gentle with ourselves and accept what's happening for us with that fear, and then think about, okay, what's something small that I can do that will build that confidence up gradually?
Yes, that's a good point. And I've done a lot of public speaking, and I really, initially, because I've always been on air, it didn't really throw me. When you see a live audience, and there'll probably be a few friends who are tackling that course, to do a public speaking course, and I think even I would like to still continue to do it, because you can always learn something. Some people in the audience are going to really be into what you're doing, and yet there's others who are there who are not quite sure of you, and their facial expressions are justifying that.
When you're doing the public speaking and you're looking out
others
at the
will hate
audience.
what you're doing, and some are like this going, yeah, right.
But isn't that like, don't they say that, what is it, something like 70% of people, you know, are going to be or not even like you? That you can't expect everybody to have a positive response to it.
Yes,
So you're attached to that response. And I think that goes back to fear and, once again, lack of confidence.
But I also think there's another aspect of that is how we interpret people's responses. So we might consider
great. I love
something personal to us. So you have that example of a person looking at their clock and looking, you know, not very interested in you, but they might be having a challenging time themselves. So we can often put our own interpretations, and we have to be careful because that can almost confirm some negative thoughts we have about ourselves.
Oh, look, totally, and I see where you're going there. It's very interesting, but I always found it amusing.
Yes.
But if I'm talking to a live audience, I try and go to as many people as I can in a live audience to make them feel involved. Mike Walsh, a one-time famous TV presenter, said the moment that your audience starts coughing, and I've been watching this for years, and it does happen, when your audience starts coughing, they're bored.
Don't cough.
Or they start sneezing.
You know I was going to throw one out there. What about sneezing?
Without any further ado, I think we better move on before we go into a coughing fit.
I do want to bring up is you, I think, are creating a whole new paradigm of conflict resolution. I've seen you doing this work. I think conflict resolution, you take the traditional methodologies of conflict resolution, but then you've added a whole new spin to it, and I think it's your intuition that you've put with it. But I've never seen anyone be able to mediate between people that have actually wanted to kill each other in a room before, and I've actually seen Tulsi do this and simmer it down like she's basically put a fire hose on them and stopped it in seconds. I don't know what it is about how you approach it or what you do, whether it's just your demeanour. I know it's very much to do with who you are as a person, but that's a whole other level.
Thanks, Viv.
You're
Well,
welcome.
I think it's also because I love the work, and I know that when you get human beings together and you help them to kind of take a step back and take stock about what's going on and have a look at potentially where there are points of agreement and work with them, sometimes this, magic can happen. And I feel that too. I don't even know how to explain at different times, but it's like getting into the zone, and I just love the work that I do. So I feel very grateful to be able to do it.
Well, so do our viewers, Tulsi, and lovely to have you with us back tonight. And Sarah has written in, and she would like to direct a question to you, if you could answer, please. I had a very difficult relationship with my parents and had to stop seeing them because of how toxic it was. I'm trying to work out and get my life back on in order again, but every time I have the idea about doing a course at TAFE that I'm interested in, I can hear my parents' voices in my head saying, "Oh, you're not studying to be a lawyer or a doctor, you're not good enough." And then I go to give up. How do I get rid of these voices in my head which keep haunting me? Is this a common trait?
Look, Sarah, I think that's a really great question, because it's something that I see a lot of, that people are challenged by voices that they have, messages that they have been, they've been given from their past, from experiences potentially with their parents or bullies or sisters, brothers, boyfriends, girlfriends, that kind of thing. So you're not alone with that message that's in your head. And I can only imagine how it is for you, because the very people that brought you up and brought you into this world, you've had to make a decision to not have them in your life anymore. So that shows a lot of clarity and strength on your part, which I think is really important to recognise for yourself. That that's a big achievement anyway. So as far as those voices go, now those voices, it's very, very tempting just to want to sort of shut them down and stop them. The unfortunate thing is, with a bit of therapy and coaching, look, it's possible that you can work with those voices a little bit more, maybe minimise them. But in general, really the best approach for you is to, rather than trying to get rid of them and feeling bad every time you hear them, is to accept that those voices will be with you. Like we all have different voices, but you don't have to listen to that voice. You can accept that that voice is there and acknowledge it, almost like an unwelcome friend. So a friend can walk in the door, an uninvited friend, and you can note that they're there, but you don't need to ask them to sit down. And then, there's probably a bit of work for you to do. Take stock around what are your own values, what is the voice that comes from your true heart, and really think about that voice and focus on that voice. So the next time the other voice comes to speak to you, the ones from your parents, you can say, okay, there it is, got it, I know it's there, I accept that that's part of me, I'll probably have that with me, potentially for the rest of my life, but that's okay, because I don't need to listen to it. I can listen to my own voice and support myself in, how I move forward in life.
Beautiful. Tulsi, before we just wrap up this segment, I've got one more question that I would like to ask you. And it's something that I see happening over and over again with myself and with friends and family. we see patterns in our lives, in relationships, in choices, in the way that we go about our work, whatever. It's kind of something that people seem to repeat. Do you have any advice on how people can break patterns? Say somebody continually chooses the same kind of person in a relationship. What's a bit of advice for them on how they can recognise that or change their behaviour?
Yeah, so look, I think the truth of it is change is difficult, but the wonderful thing about even talking about patterns is the fact that if we recognise that there is a pattern, that's our first opportunity to make that change. So without awareness, we can't make the change. So if we have that awareness about a particular pattern, and different times it's hard to get that awareness, it might require a bit of therapy or some deep and meaningfuls with some really trusted friends. But once we have that awareness that there is that pattern, then we have to really take a step back and think, where did that come from? And often we really are a product of the lives that we've lived from childhood. So that's it can take quite a bit of time to think about where those messages have come and explore it so that we can work out how we do it differently.
Yeah, and I think a lot of patterns that are instilled in us are implanted in our childhood years. But my message is to a lot of people, don't be too hard on yourselves.
Yes.
And it's all too easy to turn to the drugs or to turn to drink. And I think now more than ever, or was it just as bad in the 40s or the 50s, even after the Second World War? Look how many people came back traumatised, and even after Vietnam. And it filtered through all of our lives, and we had to cope, didn't we?
Yeah.
And a lot of people, turned to the bottle. We didn't really have counselling or psychologists in those days. Not like we do now, but we did cope. And my message is to a lot of people, focus on those good things that are about you, because there's so many people that are everyone, I feel, everyone's talented in so many ways, and focus on those gifts.
Well, I think that there's 2 points you've made there which I think are really great. One is the importance of accepting where we are right now, because that's such a powerful thing. Because if we're feeling bad about where we are, then we can keep ourselves stuck and we're focusing on the negative. And the other thing that you mentioned, which I love, which I talk about a lot, is having gratitude for what you do have. Because when we focus on gratitude, it actually changes what's happening in our brain as well.
Yes.
So it can help us create more sort of positive stuff going on without getting technical.
Yes.
And it can shift things for us. So that acceptance and that gratitude, they're such powerful kind of first steps when we are trying to change.
And I think also too, you just made me think about something there, even though you didn't mention the phrase unconditional love. What affords us of that? A pet dog or a pet cat, could be a pet bird, but we love our pets, don't we?
Well, that's why I bring mine to studio every week. Lucy's in the control room.
Yes, but you had 2 dogs last week.
I did. I inherited my mum's puppy, so I
She's
now
having
have
the night
2.
off.
She's actually at puppy training for a whole week, overnight stays, because she hasn't learnt to pee outside yet.
Well, I think that's a great idea. I mean, what you're talking about, again, are sort of small steps that sometimes can really make a huge change for a person. So if someone is feeling low or challenged, and they can have an animal, I mean, animals, as you would know, the research really does show that it can make a big difference to a person's well-being.
And exercise as well. Well, Tulsi...
Walking.
Yes, too right, my dear. And you're going to be with us a little bit later on into the show.
Absolutely, looking
Topic
forward
of
to it.
discussion.
Yes, we'll see you back soon.
And can I just thank Sarah for her question as well? I didn't kind of finish off, completely with her, but look, it's I'm really sort of appreciate those kind of questions, and it's good for us to remember that we're not alone with some of those challenges, and I think it really helps to feel not alone. So it's great.
It was very, very courageous of her to be that honest in her vulnerability.
I do feel like one of the challenges that we do face as human beings is almost like a strive for happiness, where we think, what's wrong with me if I'm not feeling happy, if life feels challenging? And in fact, for me, one of the things that's really helpful for people is to remember that we're all in the same human boat of struggling, that is the first point. So if we recognise that we are all going to struggle, and I know some of the people who asked you for readings today, I mean, it really does reflect that, you know, it's not easy being a human being. It's tough. And often we want certainty where we can't necessarily have it. And so we're trying to find the answers. And I think a couple of the sort of the first steps that we can take is recognise that we are going to have some challenges from time to time. We're going to have our down days, our happy days, our flat days, and that's part of life, so that we don't start beating ourselves up, feeling bad about feeling bad, and recognising that, you know, there will be times where we will feel really sad about things with loss, or, you know, a loss of a relationship or a person, and that is part of who we are as a human being. And that acceptance and recognising that, you know, that is going to happen for us can really help us manage that. So we're just kind of watching it and being with it, rather than thinking, what's wrong with me?
I'm going to run in because I can on occasions. Just because what you're talking about, one of my sons, seriously, when he was in, for a long time, he actually got bullied a lot at school. And then he went to boys' school, and he would walk down the street to go and catch the train to school, and he'd call me, because, you know, they all have phones. He'd call me and go, "Oh, I've just been vomiting in the street." And he really would have. He would work himself up so much because he was so scared about going to school and seeing these boys that were bullying him. He was physically sick, and it made him physically and emotionally sick for such a long time. And we thought, you know, like, we had him to doctors, and we thought, oh no, like, he's a sickly child. But it was all about the emotional fear.
And it's nothing to do about his questioning his masculinity, because I know boxers who have been friends of mine over the years, and I said, how do you prepare for a fight? And they said, Steve, sometimes I'm physically ill and I have this fear. Am I going to perform? Am I going to be threatened? Am I going to win? And he says, not always a case about winning, it's a case about having confidence. And this is a guy who's like a strong boxer, big muscly guy. I mean, you can have featherweight, lightweight, heavyweight, but he was a guy, masculine industry, full macho, and yet still consumed by this fear.
This is a boy who's been 6 foot-ish since he was about 15, so he's not tiny. But he was just so fearful of people just treating him really badly, and he just hated it. I mean, we ended up moving schools and stuff for him, and he blossomed.
And it's interesting that, you know, his brother didn't go through bullying or being sick.
Well, but didn't get through the sick thing. He coped with it in a completely different way. They both coped with different variations on a theme in a completely different way. But this one particularly, seriously, there were days when it would go on every morning.
He would get sick.
Until I let him come home. When he'd get home and I'd go, there's nothing wrong with him, I'm taking him to the doctor. You know, and
Tulsi, may I ask you?
I'll go now.
No, it's lovely having you here. I was going to ask you, in your professional capacity, what makes a bully?
Oh gosh, I don't. That's a big question. I don't know that I know the answer to that. But
because they're obviously picking on an individual. Is that individual reflecting back to them what they don't like about themselves, so therefore they take it out on them? Is that one example?
Look, I think bullying is a whole, you know, it's a whole area that, you know, there's a lot of study done around it. It's the psychological impact on people and kids is huge, and it can, you know, we talk about the messages that we have within us even when we're adults. Now, if a child has been bullied from very young, then, you know, later on in life, it can make a huge difference to how confident they feel, how able they are to embrace life. I mean, I experienced that a bit myself when I was young, and so I think it really does require so much support when someone has been bullied, but also, you know, if we're talking about kids who are the bullies, there's something not right there as well, and they need support to find out what are they doing and why is that happening, and that's why a lot of schools these days really work hard to make sure that they've got really strong anti-bullying approaches. I mean, I've got a child protection background as well, so I'm quite familiar with that area. But it's such a concern, and I think, I mean, sometimes the impact on kids is so strong, and you only know how bad it is when you, say, move them from another school, and suddenly they become who they really are.
Well, that was what happened with us, is that, you know, so many letters to the school, and it wasn't until, I know it sounds terrible, but I threatened that I would go to the Department of Education because nothing was being done about it. It was just not good enough. moved him to a different school, and this particular school said, now you have to deal with this. We have the bullies here and we have the bullied kids here. And we are a school who we work around sorting them all out and trying to help them all function.
But he functioned better in that school.
He was awesome, and he met up with kids who had been the type of kid who had bullied him, and they were terrified of bullying again. They had got out of their schools because they didn't like who they were, but it was just something, that whole pack mentality or something made them do it. And he's got really good friends from that second school. That was in end of year 9. He went there. He did, halfway through year 10. Said, year 10, this is the boy who wanted to leave school in year 9. He's like, I just want to get out. Did year 11, did year 12. He's still really good friends with people from that second school. But even now, as a 20-year-old young man, there are functions that happen from the previous school where his brother will say, oh, there's a party, do you want to come? And he'll go, who's going to be there? And he'll go, no. And it's still happening. And he's 6'3".
Yes.
And he's a fabulous young man. And these kids, some of them are still doing it. And you go,
Do you know what I witnessed yesterday? It was terrible. I was at a restaurant for Mother's Day lunch. We were down at Narrabeen Lake, and there's a lot of ducks that wander around. And we were looking out the window, and I saw a group of children around probably 6, 7, 8 years of age. And this one particular child, a boy, had a stick, and he was chasing the ducks, and he was smacking them really hard on the back. So everybody was watching, and I ran downstairs, and I gave him quite a serve, and won't repeat it. So
I've done that before.
he sort of looked at me. It wasn't perturbed at all. He walked off, and 5 minutes later, they were doing it again behind a couple of trees. Anyway, I saw this duck limping off. So it actually really hurt the duck. And the next minute, the maitre d' of the restaurant ran downstairs, and he found the parents who were obviously lunching and brought them out. But I did not see those parents chastise those children or do anything whatsoever. And I was absolutely, and by the end of it, the entire restaurant was watching this debacle go on.
It's terrible.
But I was trying to have compassion for this kid as well. I was trying to understand what would make a child want to do that. And then in some way, when I saw the parents' lack of observational care around it, I thought, well, yes, we really are a product of a lot of that. Like you were saying before, Tulsi is a product of our upbringing and that environment that we are raised in.
Yeah, and I always feel really sad about stories to do with bullying, because I know that it does have an impact. And as you say, even though your son is, very tall, and people would say, well, why would you feel vulnerable in some ways around being, with these people? The truth of it is we do feel vulnerable, and we absorb these messages and we take them with us into our adult life. And then to kind of release it or deal with it, we often have to get a bit of therapy or actually work out what's happening. Or why am I not doing these things that I know I really could do and I'd love to do, but something is holding me back. I feel stuck. So often it's like, okay, let's take a look back. Let's take a look at what was happening when you were young. What messages did you get from those around you that might be impacting? It may not be even the family. It could be just the experience at school or
something.
We're very vulnerable, and we're still, even as adults, I always think of us, we're all, it helps me to think about it. We're all in some ways vulnerable children deep down, even as adults. So when we find ourselves, reacting to someone else or feeling insecure or upset, often it's our little child that is being triggered.
Human.
We are, that's right.
And we all respond to a hug or a cuddle. So thanks for coming on the show. We've had some lovely ladies on the show tonight.
Yes.
And Tulsi, lovely to have you with us as always.
Lovely to be here. Thank you.
Always insightful and inspiring.
Oh, thank you.
And just beautiful, gentle advice. It makes you feel that you can encompass it and take on those challenges.
Bye.